Okay, well, let's get started. Um, my name is John R. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the third workshop in emotional sobriety presented by the Freethinkers Living Sober Group of the Verde Valley, Arizona. And now, actually, there's a lot more of us than just the Verde Valley group. So here's the agenda. Joe C. is going to speak for a bit about his topic, Sober Enough, an Antidote to Perfectionism, for about 30 minutes. Then the panelists will make some comments and discuss for about 20 minutes or so, and then a break. And then we'll open the discussion to anybody who would like to raise their hand for a comment. Um, that'll give us about an hour or so to do that. We do have to end right at the end of 2 hours because there are other things that we need to use the Zoom for. After the 5-minute break, because there may be a lot of people, we may limit the sharing to about 2 minutes. Cat will just come on when it's 2 minutes and let you know it's been 2 minutes. So to start to wrap up. This is being recorded. The video will not be published, but the audio will. So you might want to remember that if and when you share. I'd just like to introduce our panelists. Joe C. is probably familiar to most of our attendees because a lot of us read beyond belief. Um, aside from being an author and a friend, he's also a dad, a songwriter, a radio host, and a financial planner. We also feel very honored to count him as a member of our home group away from his home at Freethinkers Living Sober Group. Dr. Alan Berger, PhD, is a pretty popular public speaker, and he's all over YouTube. If you haven't seen him yet, I recommend it. He's the author of 12 Smart Things to Do When the Booze and Drugs Are Gone, and soon to be published 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety, Getting Your Recovery Unstuck. I hope that's not a working title, Alan. He spent the last several years writing and focusing on presenting seminars on emotional sobriety, so we're thrilled to have him with us today, and we recommend his books and his videos. And Marya Hornbacher, who is a New York Times bestselling author, journalist, poet, teacher, who's been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, by the way. Her book, Waiting a Non-Believer's Higher Power, is one of my all-time favorite books. I just absolutely love it. She also has a book that I think a lot of people might be interested in, Sane, Mental Illness, Addiction, and the 12 Steps. If you haven't read her work, please get out there and find a copy. We'd like to thank the volunteers who are supporting the webinar in the background. John S. is our stage manager, so to speak. Kat L. is our timekeeper and our chat host. Thank you guys for doing this. We really appreciate it. There is a chat function which allow you to ask questions or make comments. We ask you to stay muted unless you're asked to share. The audio for this webinar is being recorded, so keep your anonymity in mind. And because there are a lot of attendees, we'll try to get to as many people as we can, but we probably won't get to everyone. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Joe C. And thank you for being here, Joe. I really appreciate it. It's yours.
Okay, hi everybody. Let's see if this works. Okay, fantastic. And I want to tell everybody, just in full disclosure, as a fellow traveler, I spent way too much time on a talk on avoiding perfectionism than I should have. And I've been joking about that with people in my regular meeting. But this has been a real problem in my long-term sobriety and has had a huge impact on my emotional sobriety. Perfectionism, or what I will call toxic perfectionism, is not a virtue, it's a hindrance in my sobriety. And it works against me, not for me. And it saps my recovery capital. This is a new acronym I've actually borrowed from someone I know from She Recovers. shitting all over ourselves, or as Albert Ellis calls it, masturbating. You must this, I must that, we must that, AA must that. Kind of sounds like Facebook, doesn't it? Awfulizing. If perfectionism is actually a fear of failure, it isn't necessarily a motivating force, at least not for this alcoholic. And I can catastrophize all night long. Sing it with me, Lionel Richie. Like once I start imagining things that can go wrong, I can go forever. And personalizing, you get ingrown eyeballs with perfectionism. Me. Why does this always happen to me? Why am I in this traffic? Everyone depends on me. I'm not good enough. It's not good enough. It's just, uh, um, it's just a bad way of doing sobriety.
Sorry, I was trying to let somebody in and I ended up muting you,
Okay,
Joe.
I can take a hint. I really can. uh, so I want to start with some definitions. This is right from Google. Sober, sensible, prosaic, factual, level-headed, sensible, rational, dignified, self-controlled. So am I sober today? Uh, I mean, who would judge, right? And emotional. And affective state in which joy, sorrow, fear, hate, or the like is experienced and distinguished from volitional states of consciousness. A strong feeling derived from one's circumstances, moods, and relationships. So, how can I be emotional and sober at the same time? It just seems like an oxymoron. And this perfectionist can get caught in a cycle. You've probably seen one of these before. If you've been to treatment, it came in your binder, and it's the cycle of addiction. And this plays into my recovery too, because the expression, I have alcoholism, not alcoholism. So I'm still an addict alcoholic. I still have these self-perpetuating cycles. I still feel despair, and when I feel despair, I want relief. So sometimes I get preoccupied. That can lead to ritualizing, and that can lead to acting out. That could be a relapse. That could be a replacement addiction. That can be just faulty thinking, like perfectionism. And this cycle just perpetuates itself all by itself. So, when I get unmanageable, if I have a belief system that I'm not good enough, and if that belief system has the impaired thinking that I have to do AA perfect, I have to be a perfect father, I have to be a perfect worker, I have to be perfect everything, I get overwhelmed and I fall into this cycle again. My sort of 3 easy steps of escaping, this sort of cycle for sober enough is I have to learn to live with discomfort. When I'm in despair, deal. It's going to pass. I have to learn about impulse control. When life is unmanageable, I want to jump ship. I want to escape, act my age, not my shoe size. And then the way to do all this for me is I aim for balance, not for perfection. There's no finish line. There's no, I've done it. I'm sober for life. It's a daily thing, and I'm reaching for balance, not for perfectionism. When I'm in addiction, that's a state of imbalance. But also, this, I'm not good enough yet. My believing friends in recovery call it trying to be good enough for God. And, I need to live in this state of balance for my sobriety to be enjoyable. When I'm in balance, there's order in my life, but there's also spontaneity. The addiction cycle is a cycle of chaos. It can lead to um, nihilism. It can be very self-destructive. So when I'm in this destructive thing, I want order in my life. And sometimes when I kneel at the altar of uh, order, I want structure. That can lead to rigidity. and rigidity can lead to fundamentalism. And where, I know what's right for you, and I know what's right for the government, and I know what's right for AA. Bill Wilson wrote in a article, it was called The Dilemma of No Faith, where he came to the realization that he nearly messed up the whole works, that that God, as I understand him, had to be for everyone. Sometimes my aggression was subtle, sometimes it was crude, but either way, it was damaging, perhaps fatally so, to numbers of non believers. And this is the same guy, a complicated guy, who also reminded everybody these are suggested steps. AA demands that you do nothing, that you believe nothing to be a member of AA. And so I have to find my way back to this balance. I need order in my life, but if I have order without spontaneity, I lean to rigidity. And if I get tired of my routine and I want all spontaneity, I'm going to get into chaos and I'm going to fall off the other side of the ship. And neither is what we call emotional sobriety. So this this is an example of my being a bad example of emotional sobriety. First motorcycle I ever bought was an 1100. Most people start with a 500 and then maybe a 750, but I felt I was behind in life, and I bought this motorcycle. It would do 200 miles an hour. It would do 0 to 60 in 2.4 seconds. It was more motorcycle than anybody needed, but it was what I wanted. And I have to remember that, sure, I can go fast, but I don't have to be traveling at maximum speed all the time. I can be content, but that contentment doesn't need to be rocketed into the fourth dimension. A funny story, I used to nickname this motorcycle my rocket lawn chair. At the time, it was funnier in the 80s. Bruce Cockburn had written a song called If I Had a Rocket Launcher, Some Son of a Bitch Would Die. Anyway, it was a hit where I lived anyway. And so I called this my rocket lawn chair because it was just a comfortable ride. Anyway, enough of the 80s trivia. So this comes from Psychology Today, so it must be true. And I love this. Perfectionism makes life an endless report card. No matter what I don't feel good enough about, my health, my looks, my work, this endless report card is a horrible way for me to live. Yes, perfectionism, there's something in there that helps me overcome adversity. I didn't get sober without some determination. I haven't learned how to play guitar without some determination. I haven't achieved any success without some determination. But perfectionism just is that toxic taking things too far where it becomes unhealthy. And what makes extreme perfectionism so toxic is that while those in its grips desire success, they're more focused on avoiding failure, resulting in negative orientation. They don't believe in unconditional love, expecting others' affection and approval to be dependent on flawless performance. This whole idea of this sort of negative orientation, there's a story to our overseas uh, participants for the baseball analogy. I'm not even American, but the story is of a Game 7 World Series. The closer is on the mound to try to win the game. The other team's star slugger comes up to the plate. The manager comes out of the dugout, goes and talks to the pitcher and says, now, what you want to do here is do not throw him a high inside pitch. And the manager walked off the mound and back into the dugout. So the pitcher's, okay, not high inside pitch. So I guess I want a low away, not a high. And so what did he do? The only message he had in his mind was high inside. That's what he threw him. That's what was hit out of the park to win the World Series for the bad guys. And Jeffrey Munn, in his book, The Practical 12 Steps, in step 7, talks about you can't focus on undoing your damage. You have to focus on something good. He uses the analogy that if he tells you to stop thinking about a blue elephant, you can't unless you think of a red giraffe. If you think of a red giraffe, you can focus on that. You can focus on living a balanced, rightful life, but you can't focus on not being a liar, not being a resentful, not being hateful. So there are some traps in AA for me that sort of feed my perfectionism. And I'll just take you through my sort of journey of slip ups and fall ups. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Like, can't we just follow the path? How thorough? Am I doing it thorough enough? The word fail again creates that sort of fear of failure. And then who didn't, like if you're like me, every time they said there are those who are constitutionally incapable, I thought that must be me. And rigorous honesty. Now, like I hate to be fussy on words, but ask anyone outside of AA what rigorous honesty means. And they'd say, well, what do you mean rigorous honesty? Honesty is inherently rigorous. There's no other type of honesty other than rigorous honesty. But AAs, we have to, add a word. And so there's a lot in there that just makes me tend towards trying to outdo what is necessary. A searching and fearless moral inventory, please pick an adjective. Any one of those will do. Just doing an inventory will do. The exact nature of my wrongs, if I have to find out the exact nature of anything, that's where I stop. I'm never going to get to part B. Entirely ready, another word that just leaves me stuck if I'm stuck in a perfectionist loop. Having had a spiritual awakening, like, why wouldn't just an awakening be absolutely fabulous enough? There's a story you may have heard about these pilgrims looking for the Buddha. And as this made up story goes, they go through the jungle and they find the Buddha and they say, so we've heard all about you. Are you a god? No. Are you a prophet? No. Are you a teacher? No, I'll save you all the rest. It goes through this whole list. It says, well, then what are you? They said in frustration. And the Buddha said, I am awake. So, just being awake as a result of these steps, I think should be enough. And I can remember the first time I heard this, happy, joyous, and free. Well, again, pick one, right? If I try to constantly measure, am I happy enough? Am I joyous enough? Am I free enough? I get stuck. And this is something I repeat often. If a word is standing between you and the recovery you need, the contentment you're looking for, just change the word. By my experience, the word won't mind. And if I don't, I get stuck. And this is from Experiencing Spirituality by Ernie Kurtz and Catherine Ketchum, Finding Meaning Through Storytelling. And it describes like non-emotional sobriety. It describes the state of confusion that perfectionism causes in me. Something within us occasionally suggests that we are made for other than we now are. We somehow fail to grasp the present. Some see this unease as a kind of deviation, a sign of maladjustment or illness. Others locate in the essence of our humanity, which many seek to express in art. There seems to be some kind of confusion buried in the very core of being. It seems impossible for many of us to simply be, simply to experience, simply to anything. My daughter's mom, a black belt ACA member, would say, well, your AA sobriety, ACA is like dog years, like, my 3 years of ACA, it's like 21 years, way more than your 11 years of AA. Anyway, we were petty. But it led to some problems. But she called me on this thing. She said, Joe, you are a human doing. You have to learn to be. And she was right. I it seemed impossible just to be. And it was my great undoing. And a lot of it had to do with this. I wasn't good enough, and I had to keep doing. But just so a lot of what I learned about emotional sobriety, I learned reading bedtime stories to children. So we'll now go to the doctor's opinion 2.0. Uh, I'm sorry to say, uh, but sadly it's true that bang ups and hang ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch, and your gang will fly on. You'll be left in a lurch. You'll come down from the lurch with an unpleasant bump, and the chances are then you'll be in a slump. But here's the promises from the good doctor. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life is a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your left foot from your left, your right foot from your left. And you will succeed. Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. So yeah, life is a balancing act. And when I can live in balance, it just gives me a greater understanding of what's going on in my sobriety. I don't have to hyperanalyze everything. You see, these feelings, dealing with these feelings is what my emotional sobriety is all about. And if I'm trying to avoid the feelings, that starts that addictive cycle, craving, aversion, wanting to get away from something, wanting something. If I'm lonely, I'm going to feel that I need the attention of somebody else. I will find some object to cling to. That's sort of the addictive pattern. But again, if I'm not trying to be perfect about my feelings, like I have to stop feeling angry, I have to stop feeling mad, I can sort of be mindful and look back. All of these feelings come from my senses. And then this is something I just sort of borrowed from a sort of Buddhist paradigm. It's called the dependent origination. And I'm not a Buddhist, and I'm not doing it justice. It's this whole complex thing. It involves death and reincarnation and rebirth and all of this. But for me, an addict, I found something in it that was quite useful. And senses are normal. You can think of jumping into a lake, the cold water on your skin, or someone plays you a song you've never heard before and it touches you. But contact is also all of my biases, all of my conditioning, all of my AA conditioning. Um, if you are the child of a dysfunctional home or an addict, and you're in your room and you hear the car pull into the driveway, your feeling is going to be based on your experience. Are you afraid? Are you excited? Are you delighted? Are you panicking? So your feeling has nothing to do with your senses. It has everything to do with the conditioning here. And that's the sort of thing that tends to get me going in a way that these will all happen, as we looked at in the sort of addiction cycle, all by themselves if I don't consciously, mindfully think, what am I feeling? Where is it coming from? How important is it? It's about right sizing those things. And so things are circular, a little bit of yin and yang. I'm going to just close out with a prop. And my explanation of living in balance, I'm going to borrow this yoga ball. If I could have made it all black and white like yin and yang, I would have, but I couldn't find my Sharpie. So sometimes I sit on this, and when I'm sitting on this, I can lift my feet off the ground and I'm balancing, but I'm never in balance. I'm always counterbalancing. If I get too forward, if I think about the future too much, I'm going to face plant. If I get too caught up in the past, I'm going to crack my head open. If I go from spontaneous to chaotic, I'm going to fall this way. If I get too rigid, I'm going to fall that way. I've got to constantly rebalance myself. And that's my whole life. And that's my whole sobriety. There's nowhere to get to. It's just a matter of getting back in the middle and finding my way here. And that's how I try to sort of live my life and live my sobriety today. None of this lifetime report card, none of this racing to the finish line. That's never going to happen. And I can't wait to hear what everybody else has to say about that. Thanks for your time.
All right, Joe. Thank you. All right.
That was awesome.
Well, that's great. Okay. Well, what I'd like to do now is maybe we could have a response from Marya first. Marya?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And Joe, thank you so much for such a great presentation. There's never a time I've heard you when I haven't gotten like steeped in wisdom and straightforwardness at the same time, which is a balance. What I was really struck by in this was thinking about what a hindrance perfectionism and also just the factor of imbalance is both to emotional sobriety, but really to functionality. You know, if my goal in sobriety in any form of recovery is functionality, maximum effectiveness, let's say. My first sponsor, whose name was Jim, he's like 96 now. My first sponsor said, you know, stop thinking about character defects and the kind of the religious overtones of that. Start thinking about, is this something that increases your utility to other people, or does it make you ineffective and useless? And that was so much more helpful to me. And balance for me is sometimes about draining the overtones of the language a little bit. And so thinking about the idea of perfectionism simply as an impracticality has been very, very helpful to me in recovery. I have my story includes both substance addictions and also really extreme anorexia, which if you want a study in absurdist, perfectionistic, anti-utilitarian approaches to the universe, just starve yourself full time and see how it goes. Because what happens there is what my experience was with that degree of perfectionism is it becomes, as Joe said, so solipsistic, so inward looking. You're trying to perfect yourself in this sort of way that is totally impractical, unrealistic. And once you've done it right, you die. That's the outcome. That's your best guess as to like how well this will go. If you do it best, you die fastest. Addiction to me is easier to say, like substance addiction, process addictions are easier for me to go, oh, we don't want that. But we live in a culture where some of our addictive behaviors are really rewarded. The extreme perfectionism and the extreme chaos, the fundamentalism and the distress out, you know, the acting out. Those things can be really rewarded. And for me, part of living in balance is constantly pulling myself back from the temptation to be in either of those extremes, whether to the far edge of I'm going to be the best, most balanced yoga lady ever and breathe perfectly every time, or to be like, I feel like getting a motorcycle. I've never ridden a motorcycle, but I bet I can. You know, so like my own imbalance is so evident to me in every decision I make. And the process of learning to balance is, as Joe said, a process. I'm never in balance. It's constantly correcting and counterbalancing. And so to me, balance and sober enough becomes something that's really about staying active. Like when you're exercising, when you're doing any kind of exercise, emotional, physical, any kind, it's active, you're engaged. And so recovery to me, really lively recovery and emotional sobriety hinges on that engagement, that full body, full mind, full spirit engagement in the process of staying balanced. So maybe not exciting, but constantly, constantly enlivening and invigorating. So that's my thoughts. Thank you, Joe. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, Marya. You know
Thanks,
what I used
Marya.
to say is I know that point of balance. It's the point I cross on the way to my next extreme. Alan, would you like to jump in for a minute or few?
Okay, there we go.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Joe. Thank you so much.
Hi, Alan.
I too get so much out of hearing you share, and I'm a big fan of Dr. Zeus. I mean, I think that all the places you go should be required reading for emotional sobriety. I mean, and I had that same passage when I read that to my daughter. I go, my God, this is it. This is it. He's got it. He really understood it. What a great lesson to learn. You know, this whole concept, the first time that I encountered it when we did that other workshop on emotional sobriety, it really struck me at how important this is. And I want to try to put it in a context for a minute. See, I think a lot of us can relate to the fact that we all lived our lives without there being room enough for ourselves in our life. So when I think of sober enough, I think of making room enough for myself in my life. And see, all the ideas, all these nonsense ideas that are perpetuated by, this culture that we live in that is focused on perfectionism. I mean, we talk about, my God, he hit the perfect forehand, or, they had the perfect score in gymnastics and stuff like that. Was the perfect stroke in golf. I mean, we're all set up to believe that somehow that is the most important goal in life. And I set that up unconsciously with all the ideas I had about who I should be. I could relate to Dr. Ellis's masturbating. I spent my whole life doing that stuff, right? It's the kind of experience I had. And so at a very early age, how this became a personal thing for me is I really came up with a set of ideals about who I should be to be okay. And that's where the real trouble started for me. And I think those were very unconscious, and they happened pretty early on in life. I mean, I'm still, tripping over them. I like what John said. I pass that point of balance as I go, on my way to my next extreme, kind of a thing, right? I totally relate that. So these idealized, or this image I have of an idealized self, I thought was going to be my salvation. And I dedicated my life to live up to that. That was the goal I had in life. And it was an impossible goal. Bill calls it putting the cart before the horse. That becomes an impossible way of life. And I tried to live that impossible way of life. And the only way I could pull it off was to make sure I was drinking enough and doing enough drugs, because it was impossible. I could not live with myself the way that I was trying to live my life. This dedicating myself to actualizing a concept of who I should be was an impossibility. And I always felt like a failure. I always felt ashamed. I always felt like the Wizard of Oz. If you pulled back the curtain, you'd see who I really was, and then you wouldn't like me, you wouldn't love me, those kinds of things. And it really has created a ton of suffering in my life. And when you said this thing about, that what I realized at some point is that I took all of those things and I applied it to the program. Now, if I could just be the perfect AA member, if I could work the steps perfectly, if I could understand this program perfectly, I'd get it. So all I did in my recovery, until I started to look at this issue in emotional sobriety, I just took the dirty shoe off one foot and put it on the other one. I mean, that's exactly what my experience was, is sticking it on the other foot and thinking, my God, now that it's on the right foot, I'll be okay. It was like a Cinderella deal, right? If I could just get the glass slipper to fit, of perfectionism, then I'd be okay. And now AA would do that, because I didn't have the key before, but now AA, these principles, this was it. right? It turned out to be fool's gold. I mean, this wasn't it. It wasn't about that. It was my relationship with myself that had to change. And that relationship had to change along the lines that we're talking about today, Joe. Had to change along the lines of now starting to have a much more humble relationship with myself. Not to say that that perfectionism still doesn't show up, and I kind of deal with it in a funny way. I was trained in Gestalt therapy, and we do things very opposite. If you want to change something, you got to first own what the hell you're doing. I'll never forget the first time Dr. Kempler confronted me with this perfection. He says, "Okay, what I want you to do is," I was in a room with 30 people. He says, "I just want you to go and stand in front of each person and say, I must be perfect if I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to do everything I can over the next 3 days that we spend together to show you that I can be perfect." And so I had to stand in front of each person and say this. Oh my God, the pressure. I thought I was going to explode right on the spot because I never owned it that clean and that directly. And, we say in Gestalt therapy that there's a paradoxical theory of change. As soon as you own what you're really doing, then something new becomes possible. And this becomes very important. You just can't get the idea of letting this go. You got to own it first. You got to own how you've been driven by perfectionism. You got to own what it means to your life. And then when I own this stuff is when a new possibility exists. And the new possibility can be sober enough. The new possibility can have a life where there's room enough for me. And if there's room enough for me, I'm going to be able to make room for you. That's a whole nother discussion about how, all of this stuff doesn't make room for anybody else either. There's not room for me, but there's not room for you. I'm going to do the same thing to you I'm doing to myself. So thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks,
You know,
Alan.
this reminded me of I spent my first several years in AA, not just AA. Since the idea was that you were supposed to, get rid of these defects of character and you were supposed to perfect yourself, I then had to start into Al-Anon after a year of sobriety, and then I had to start into ACA, and then I went to the Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and then I was about 10 or 11 years sober, and it suddenly dawned on me that I had become so myopic in my vision that all I could see was disease. That's all I could see. Everything was wrong, diseased. And and then I had a sponsor who told me, just breathe. I'm like, what do you mean just breathe? Just breathe, especially out, he said. Breathe out. That's very important. Because when I got afraid or angry or any of those big emotions, I I I I was like this, and and so he knew I needed to let go and breathe. It was the thing that I got. You were talking about when you had the thing about emotions and contact and all of that. Um, One of the things that's really helped me is to think about the difference between reaction and response. And the 10-second pause, which obviously Bill had never experienced anger the way I did because getting a 10 seconds to pause was not in my reality. But getting that pause to be able to be with that emotion, to be with what's going on, has been really, really critical for me. Um, Whenever I'm experiencing a really strong emotion, um, yeah, it comes from my perception, uh, it filters through my own cognitive biases and all of that stuff and into a feeling. But the solution for me first has to be to stop and breathe and be present with what is going on. First, what's going on with me, and then maybe what's going on outside of me. Because as long as I'm reacting to what's going on outside of me, I, people did not have a good time with me when I was. I had this small problem with anger for, I don't know, 20, 30 years of my sobriety. And I tried not to have it. I tried to perfect myself so that I wouldn't have that and I could get rid of it. And it got worse and it got worse and it got worse. So the solution for me has always been about learning how to have some compassion and some understanding and an ability to be with whatever the hell is going on. I'm not saying it's easy. I don't do it all the time. I certainly don't do it perfectly. You can ask my wife. but but I'm a lot better than I was, and it's enough. It's enough. Thank you, Joe, so much. Anybody else? Any of the other panelists want to put in a couple?
You know, if it seems just too abstract for anyone, here's me at 20 years clean and sober. So I get sober as a teenager. I'm 16. In 1977, I get my 1 year cake. I think, oh, I'm really doing this. I'm really staying sober. And then I started projecting out. I could be 20 years sober one day. And right there, I started planning my humble acceptance speech for my 20-year sobriety. And I figured I'd be president of AA by then, really, and whatever that was. But, you know, I was looking forward to this great opportunity. And by 20 years, well, let's say 19 years sober, I have two children from two boy meets girl on AA campus romances. And, you know, it wasn't me. I was a victim of a series of bad breaks and serious misunderstandings. And so I was in custody battles, and there was parental alienation, and it was like people, it was tribal, people taking sides. I was now HIV positive, a gift of sobriety. So I had boundary issues. And like John referred to, I was a member of several 12-step fellowships. And I was at such an emotional low. People, Joe, when are you going to get your medallion? I didn't. I wouldn't. I did not want to be paraded up to the front as, you know, some example of if you want what we have. I wouldn't wish what I had on anybody. But that was my problem, right? I'm a sample of sobriety. I'm not an example of anything. I'm just where I am right now. It was as legitimate as anybody else in the room, and there was nothing to be ashamed of. And, you know, there are a few in this room who were there with me for that whole journey of darkness. And that's where perfectionism gets you, because you try harder and you get more frustrated and you need to let go. And that was my great challenge. And now I'm
Thanks,
nearly
Joe.
perfect.
Okay, so we've pretty much hit the 20-minute mark. Unless Marya, did you want to add anything quickly, or Alan, before we take a little break?
When we're doing conversation, probably I'll have a few minutes just to talk about identity and perfectionism, maybe a bit later. But beyond
Okay.
that, I'm just so enjoying this. Thank you.
Alan, are you ready for a break? Okay. Well, let's take about a 5-minute break so we can catch our breath, and then we'll open it up so that everybody can have an opportunity to share, or everybody that wants to and can jump in. What
We
we're going
should
to
have a
ask for.
timer with Jeopardy music.
That's actually what I was going to do. I think you should be able to see it, but I don't have Jeopardy music. I'm sorry,
No,
Joe.
no. Yeah, that way people can unmute and talk too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, why don't we start up again? So I'm going to do the mute all deal, which means you'll have to unmute when you want to share. So please keep yourself muted until that time. We do have a timekeeper, Kat. She'll say 2 minutes when 2 minutes has gone by, so that'll give you an opportunity to kind of gauge and wrap up what you're talking about. I wanted to mention that our next one after this, by the way, is going to be on the 28th of March, when Marya is going to be the presenter, and she'll present on emotional range, skillfully navigating highs, lows, and in-betweens. The easy way to remember this is it's the last Sunday in March and the last Sunday in May. Okay, so let's jump in. Doris, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. My name's Doris, and I'm alcoholic. And I just wanted to relate to the deal about trying to be perfectionist. My first 20 years of sobriety, I was trying to live up to these spiritual principles. So when I got upset when a person stood me up in the program or things like that, then I would go, oh, there's something wrong with me. It was totally ridiculous. There's something wrong with me. I'm not being spiritual enough. I'm not being understanding enough, blah, blah, blah. And I went on and on like this. And between 17 and 20 years, I started losing my conscious contact with God. And when I went to go get my 20-year chip in my home group, I was shaking so bad, everybody thought that I had been drinking. And so I started all over. I acted like I was a newcomer. I totally redid my program. I just, I started going to like 3 meetings a week again. I mean, 3 meetings a week. And I just undid everything that I ever thought was the right way to do the program with this spirituality, perfectionism stuff. And I just started being me and learning a new way of life. And so now I've got almost 45 years, and my God, I'm happier. I dropped all those people in AA, every single one of them. Started all over. Thank you. Not drinking, just all over. Thank you.
Thanks, Doris. By the way, if any of the panelists want to jump in, just let me know and we'll go for
Sounds familiar. That's all I'll say.
it. Jenny? Jenny from Massachusetts?
Hey, I'm Jenny and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. So perfectionism, this is what really gets me every time. Everything has to be perfect. I have to have the perfect life. I have to have the perfect marriage. I have to have the perfect decor, as if anyone's been in my house in the last year, right? But it's got to be perfect because someone is judging, and it's not a higher power, so it's got to be me. It's just constantly, desire for perfection brings out so much self-judging in me, and it just will not shut up. It's really my thing. And it leads to multitasking and over-scheduling and trying to accomplish.
In here tonight, I
shitloads.
want to ask you about responding from that loss. I know there was questions coming into this game about.
Oh, should I keep talking?
No, go ahead. Somebody was unmuted.
Oh, all right. Multitasking. Like for now, for instance, I really enjoyed Joe's talk, but what was I doing? I was doing yoga on the floor while I was listening instead of sitting here being seen, participating, right? Because I have to go to another meeting after this. And before that, I had to run and I had to, fit all my recovery in on schedule. So, I guess I'm getting better. I'm not getting better. It's a really good topic and really enjoy being here. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Donovan.
Hi, my name is Donovan. I am an alcoholic and a drug addict and all kinds of stuff. I love this subject, and I want to thank you and John and everybody else who put this on, Joe. Man, when you were reading the kind of the 12 steps about rigorous honesty and searching and fearless inventory, I've always, I don't know what that is. I'm not sure I know what a moral inventory is, but especially when they say you got to talk about resentments. But this idea of perfectionism, I often think there's a song by Jefferson starship. And one of the lyrics is, who's been telling you about perfection and how did they get in here? That's the question. And I often wonder, well, where did I get this idea? And Dr. Berger talked about owning it. And it seems like that's all I do is own, my failure at almost everything, but certainly AA. And I go to these meetings and I hear people, it's almost like it's a contest to who's the most grateful and how, who, loves AA the most. And man, in the 34 years I've been coming to meetings and off and on, I certainly don't have that much sobriety, but I've never felt that way. And it makes me, I was at one yesterday and it really made me angry. Like there's gotta be people who feel like I do that, I'm just kind of hanging on, I'm free from the obsession to drink and use, but I don't think, these promises it talks about, Jesus, I mean, I don't know. So I have a question, and that is, I think I own too much of my misery and failure, and I wanted to ask the panelists if you say that owning it is the first step to changing, then how does one do that? So thanks for letting me talk.
Yeah, that is
Thanks, Tom.
brilliant. Here's a term I used to say at the bottom of the pit of despair: I'm the architect of my own misfortune. And the fact that there was some truth in that, it just wasn't a whole truth, right? And shit happens to good people all of the time. And, like when I was talking about the wording in the big book, there's nothing wrong with big book enthusiasm, but there is a problem with big book fundamentalism. If this is what works for me and this is what I'm going to do and this is what I recommend to you, that's fine. But if this is what works for me and anything else is watered down recovery or blah, 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 and that sort of thing, then it's just, it's not AA anymore, is it? And that idea of like right sizing my role in everything, I think is hugely important. The average AA member is 10 years sober. And Bill Wilson wrote that when he was 3.5 years sober. Most people 10 years sober won't go looking for a sponsor 3.5 years sober, right? But, and it was the collection of AA's experience at the time, right? And when we see it that way, it is as true today as it was then in terms of reflecting what was going on. Fantastic. But when I treat it as a weapon against myself and keep beating myself over the head with it because I'm not living up to these high and mighty words, I've missed the point. I've gone from usefulness and sharing of experience to, being put in AA jail.
I want
So
to
that's
follow up.
not a solution, Donovan, but man, I identify.
I so appreciate Donovan bringing that up, and Joe also what you just said springboards right into what I've been thinking about here about how perfectionism, whether it's to the far extreme of I am perfectible, which to me is a pretty arrogant notion that I would one day be perfect enough. The idea that I am perfectible is one type of extreme emotion. But so is my friend Ruth often calls this when I'm being particularly egregiously, dramatically hard on myself. She's like, okay, so we're back to being, you're the special evil one now, right? Okay, so you're all the bad things, badder than everybody else, Marya. Everybody is shitty, but you're shittiest. I'm like, shut up, but she's so right. I mean, this is why I've been friends for 40 years, right? But also the fact is this sort of the desire to be and to narrate ourselves, I think, identify ourselves as, and this is why we hear drunkalogs in every 12-step program is, I was so far down this, and it was so bad that this. That to me is A, not the solution, and B, it fixes me. Thank you. That's shittier than now syndrome. I love that, Liza. The sense that I need to find self in how bad it got, and getting stuck in that part of my story doesn't allow me into how freaking boring and amazing it is now. Like, what I love about recovery is it's fine. It doesn't have to be amazing all the time. It doesn't have to be the fourth dimension. It doesn't have to be horrific. It can be pretty much the middle bits. And I really love that notion. So letting go for me of the identity of I am the most broken, I am the most ill, and also letting go of the I'm gonna get this perfect. Either of those extremes get me, of course, out of balance. And now I'd like to pass it to Carly M, if I could.
Wait, before you do, I wanted to share something as a panelist.
Yeah.
Because your
Alan.
your comment and the comment before this, I think really gets to this point about what do we do when we start to become aware that we have this. And Donovan, what I would say to you is you're not owning it. You think you're owning it, but what you're doing is just beating yourself up. And there's a whole different experience in owning something and beating yourself up with something. So when you identify with the perfectionist as that's who you should be, and then you say that, oh my God, I've done this, I've made this mistake, you're still in your perfectionism. You're not outside of it. And owning it puts you outside of it. So let me talk about that for a second. See, I think it's important to separate something. There's a part of us that expects us to be perfect. And if you don't understand that it's just a part of you, then you're going to identify with that part, and that becomes your full identification. And it's not. The way you're going to get some freedom from it is to become aware of the part of you that expects you to be perfect, become aware of all the messages it sends to you, become aware of its beginnings, all of those things that we do when we start to dig into this. But then, and here's the important thing, is to separate yourself from that part. No, that's just a part of you, because when you identify it, there's no room for change. And you're like this, you're right up against it. So when you say I'm a perfectionist versus I have a side of me that expects me to be perfectionistic, or that expects me to be perfect, that's when the freedom comes in. As soon as you separate and you see that that part is over there away from you, now you can start to look at your relationship to that part. That's what I was saying earlier when I said that the issue here is the relationship we have with ourselves. If there's no room for me in my relationship with myself, I'm in trouble. And with the perfectionist, there's no room for me. It has certain ideas about how I'm supposed to be. And if I don't fit in with those, then it just unleashes self-hate to get me back in line. That's the game that part plays. So let's be clear that owning it is not sitting there beating yourself up. It's what Joe said a minute ago. That's not owning it. Owning it says, my God, that side of me expects me to be perfect. And I listen to it. And I've been listening to it my whole life. What the heck is going on here? What if I start to disagree with it? No, I don't need that way to be okay. What I need to be okay is stop listening to you. I mean, let's form a revolution, an insurrection, but a healthy one, huh? Let's get rid of that tyrant inside of us. So I wanted to share that part.
Thanks, Alan. Carly, would you like to share?
Yes. So I feel like listening to the presentation and the panelists, I felt like this is extremely pertinent. Even, today. And so I have always felt like being perfect was my ticket out of various situations. It started very young. I have to do this. I have to do this. It was all very education oriented. And then it kind of, as I got older, became, other things. But I have found myself telling myself that not doing certain things is just not an option. And then I wonder, why I feel like I'm, stalling out, in my job, which I've just started, in, my creative pursuits, and even in, my sobriety. I often feel, very burnt out. And sometimes, I'm not aware that I'm doing it. On Friday, I was talking to my boss, and she, said to me, you do realize, like, you don't have to know exactly what you're doing, and you do not have to have all of the answers. And I was kind of dumbfounded. And I was like, do I do that? And she was like, yeah, you literally do that every day. And so I don't necessarily know where I'm, going with this, but I think that if this is not, if this is something that is not adjusted and not addressed, it's not going to go well for me. So thank you so much. And that's kind of all I have for right now.
Thank you, Carly. Marla in Seattle.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Wow, thanks for this. Joe, thank you for that, and your slide from Psychology Today. I really want to speak to Marya. I also live with bipolar disorder and an eating disorder. And when I read your book, Sane, about 3 years ago, it just spoke to me, and the value that you have added to my life and my recovery is immeasurable. And I want to say thank you for that. I am in treatment for my eating disorder again for the second time right now. And it's been very helpful. And in November, I had 3 years clean and sober, and all one day at a time, right? One foot in front of the other, with food and recovery in all manner, and medication. I'm getting that tweaked again just to keep sane. And I really like this statement from Psychology Today about not believing. They don't believe in unconditional love, expecting others' affection and approval to be dependent on a flawless performance. Holy shit balls, is that me? I need to be perfect at work and in everything I do, because I don't think that I am gonna be recognized if I don't exceed and do 172% all the time. And I burn myself out. And I beat myself up. I beat myself to a pulp when I don't, when I'm not perfect at my job. So this has really, really been great. So thank you all, and thank you, Dr. Berger, and thank you, Joe, and thank you, Marya, for being here and for just really putting on such a great workshop.
2 minutes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. Appreciate it. Judy Hollis.
Thank you.
Were you not ready?
No, I'm ready. Thanks. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much. Hi, I'm Judy. I'm a recovering alcoholic, overeater, and Al-Anonic. Anyway, some of my questions already got answered here. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so, I was talking with Marya yesterday about, working on a book about the difference between early recovery and longer term recovery. How do you practice it differently later on? And I spent my first at least 20 years on that pendulum swing of the chaos, And what I realized is it's sort of like a clock, with the pendulum, right? So that every time I went to one of the extremes or the other, I had to pass through the middle. And that kind of, as I looked back down, as I was swinging, I could see what middle looks like, that whole balance we're talking about. to talk to me as a newcomer about getting balance, I don't have a conception of what it looks like. And like was mentioned, when I got to feel serene, I thought, this is boring. This is just a boring life. And it was very hard to accommodate all my violent experience to this nothingness of recovery. And today I'm extremely grateful, and I don't even have that much interest in even observing or commenting on myself, which sounds like you're not in recovery. But I'm almost like a normie, I just am living my life. Amazing. But I guess that issue about, old timers talking to millennials, any ideas you guys on the panel have about how you bridge that gap in communicating? This is a set of ideals, and this is where you are today. And as you're all talking, I thought, I'm so grateful for my first sponsor, where she just met me where I was. Let's just deal with your current crisis and not tell you these
2 minutes, Judy.
Okay. And by the way, Jenny in Massachusetts, please send me your number. I asked you in the chat because I do yoga while I listen to these guys too. And I thought I was the only multitasker in recovery. Anyway, thanks everybody. I love you. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Good to see you. Kenji, San Francisco.
Hi there, Ken G in San Francisco, recovering person and AA member. So I'm thinking of duality here, not being, watching out for perfectionism, but on the other hand, being cautious about my, what I consider the 4 horsemen of my apocalypse, which is complacency, laziness, procrastination, and fear. And balancing that. I mean, I know that my mom was kind of, as she aged, she got more and more sort of calcified and didn't feel real good about her life. And there was a lot of, I told you so, you should have listened to me. And I can still, she's been gone for over 25 years, but that voice is still kind of in my head. I can still sort of see this finger waggling. And I don't even know how much of it was actually my, the actual voice of my mother, and how much of it is just voice and, just exists in never did exist in the real world outside my head. So just a thought. So I'm wondering about that, balancing, not wanting to be too perfectionistic, but on the other hand, not wanting to just spend my life watching Law and Order reruns and sitting around getting fat. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenji. I remember about, 20 years ago or so, my wife and I were laying in bed, and she said, well, why are you always so hard on yourself? And I said, well, because if I'm not hard on myself, I'll never get anything done. But what I found out is it's just the opposite. And the more I was able to let go, the easier it was to actually get some things done. How about Paula?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm Paula here in Huntsville, Alabama. This is spot on timing to be able to attend this workshop today. I had a meltdown with perfectionism and just beating myself up yesterday. And, this doesn't happen to me often, but yeah, I failed at 2 things completely that were very important to me. And my reaction was not, it wasn't appropriate to what had happened. I got so sick from just mulling this thing over and over that I just ended up having to put myself to bed and stay in bed. I just couldn't deal. And, my story is that I had long-term sobriety. And then I had a long, very severe relapse that almost killed me. And I'm 10 months back in. every once in a while, I remember things from my first sobriety that helped tremendously. And one thing I remember today was, I'm going to have those days. And when I do, damn it, I'm sober. That's an accomplishment. I am not supposed to be sober. I'm supposed to be dead after what I've been through. And there are going to be days that just being sober is a huge accomplishment, and that is enough. That's enough. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Paula.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Roxanne? Roxanne.
First time she's heard that today, I'm sure.
I'm sure of it. You
She's
gotta
up there.
unmute. Roxanne, can you hear us? You're still muted.
There I am.
There
I'm
you
Roxanne,
go.
I'm an alcoholic. Sorry,
Hey,
I was late to the party. I was at work. Everything that everyone has said has resonated with me. I feel my sponsor called me that I was on a pink cloud, which made me feel like I was legally blonde AA. I've had to, before I stopped drinking, my son stopped drinking. And there was a time where we had to sort of talk about this temperament, right? Because as much as it can lead us down rabbit holes of perfectionism and eating disorders and depression and all sorts of things, the positive side, when we do know how to sort of balance it, is that we are those people who innovate and create and do. And sometimes we forget because we're so busy sort of thinking what's wrong with us, that we forget to sort of focus on what's right with us. You know what I mean? And it's been not delightful. I mean, it kind of sucks, right? There's sadness. There's all sorts of things that come with not drinking anymore. But there's a certain part where you're surrounded by people who have done pretty amazing things. And that part has been very uplifting to me. And, yeah, you can be a perfectionist and change your outfit 7 times before you leave the house. Or you can say it's good enough and leave. But again, I try to focus on the fact that along with the inability to consume alcohol, that there's creativity and sensitivity to people that maybe I wouldn't have if I didn't have that. And I appreciate all the input on how people are finding ways to
2 minutes, Roxanne.
Write their scales. And I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me share. And thanks for putting this together.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Before you call on someone else, I wanted to go back to what Judy brought up about sharing some ideas about that, because I think it's such an important issue to look at. What does our evolution look like in the program, and what is reasonable to expect and what's unreasonable to expect, or what comes out of I like that distinction that Joe made, toxic perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And look, striving to do the best we can and is a healthy thing, right? As long as we never fool ourselves into thinking that we can hit perfectionism and stay there. You might hit there momentarily, but you're not going to be able to set up house there. But I wanted to share my experience, Judy, with you. And look, you and I go back and we saw the evolution of our consciousness together, which has changed so much over the years. Judy was very much involved with my professional career. We met back in 1970. I think it was like 3 or 4, and we've been colleagues ever since then. So it's been an incredible journey we've had together. But my experience is that there were so many early on that I wasn't even aware that there was a possibility of having a different kind of a consciousness than I had. It's what do they say? You don't know what you don't know, kind of a thing. And I even had people thought differently and had different ideas about. I mean, I was so lost in my own world and so self-centered, and and focused on that things like, my God, that, you know, people think differently or react differently in those situations were such revelations for me. And that expansion of consciousness just has grown and grown and grown. But it really started by owning how ignorant I was. And I remember that was the worst thing in the world. I thought, my God, if somebody knew I was ignorant, it was like the most terrible thing. I could not in any way expose my ignorance. And so I was a big phony about a lot of things. So I don't know why that I picked phony over ignorance, because today I'd much rather be ignorant than a phony. I mean, my God, there's a lot more hope for ignorance than for being a phony in life. I mean, so it's very interesting, the evolution of these things. So it's, to me, it's the expansion of consciousness that comes through humility that seems to be the common thread through this whole experience, right? That, Judy, when I look at your life and I look at my life and if I juxtapose it, that we've kept evolving because we're still students in so many ways. We're still coming with that same awe. When I came back from this workshop after I met Dr. Kempler, I said, look at this book I found. And we sat and we read it together and we go, oh my God, look at this is a way we can work with families. That's so much better than what we've been. I mean, and I still see that in you today. You have that excitement and that wonder about life. And it's so valuable to me to have you as my friend and to share that with you. But I see that in myself as well.
Thanks, Alan. That's great. Michael from DC.
Hi, this is Michael from DC. I'm a grateful alcoholic. I am grateful because it reminds me of what I am. This is my truth, and this is the truth sets me free. But also, you know, I suppose I've been very touched by this perfectionism, which is like insidious comparison with other people. That's what it is for me. And I don't know, I used to think it was necessary for competition, and whoever won the prize got the trophies, you know. And so I can hardly live without it. But the thing is, it shuts me down when I really think about it. It causes a tremendous loss of energy and a loss of life too. And you know, maybe it comes from Madison Avenue. I'm supposed to look like Clark Gable or someone like that, or, you know, someone living that's a matinee idol, or you know, the movie is supposed to work. I want to be in a certain movie. I've got an idea of a movie, and I want to live that life rather than my own life. So I don't know. Is that part of the problem? And just you know, believing these scripts that are running unconsciously in my mind. I've heard a lot today about people that want to have a certain body image and multiply addicted people. And I managed to get as many more addictions than I can count, but I think they're all related to a desire to avoid or control my emotions and be, you know, satisfied with myself. So in a way, the answer is God for me, because, you know, his burden is lighter than the one I impose on myself. And that's why I like the idea of God, you know, following God's direction, because Bill Wilson insisted that the problem was the misuse of willpower. So if I run things my way, it's almost certain to be wrong. And the balance might be just a 180 or something like that.
2 minutes,
I
Michael.
need people to find it, you know. So that's more of a question than an answer. I just wondered if anybody would have any thoughts about it.
Thanks, Michael.
I just wanted to say something to Michael real quick. I thought you were Clark Gable when you started talking, Michael. I love you, Michael.
Thank you.
I love your questions all the time. I think they're great, man. You're a very thoughtful man, and you always come in with a lot of thoughtful reflections on this stuff.
Okay, Jeb Barrett.
Oh, thanks so much. My name is Jeb, and I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And
Hey, Jeb.
I really am thankful for a very provocative and evocative discussion. And that's something that I'm really grateful to AA for, is that no one person speaks for AA as a whole. That includes Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, or Joe C. And Joe and I have had many discussions about such things. Because I've learned to rely a lot on the experience, strength, and hope of others, particularly in the main text of the old big book, but also in personal stories that remind me that of a brother of one of my high school classmates. When he came into AA in Missoula, Montana, he says, I came here looking for all sorts of answers, but I found out that all that AA offers is the right questions. And I continue to take everything that I hear as a question for my own inventory about what I think, what I believe, what I depend upon, what I'm convinced of. And somehow or in this process of recovery, I had to become my own best friend, someone I could trust and love unconditionally. And that is one thing that has made me, that's a goal that I've had, that has made me a better person in relation to myself and others. This subject of perfection has always been interesting to me because I was told, practice makes perfect. But I learned in AA, practice makes progress. And that's what I expect as I continue to apply the 12-step process, not the way that Bill summarized them on page 59 and 60, but the way that he kind of described it. And of course, he really should have said, these are the steps I took, which was suggested as a program recovery. I admit it. Well, how he got away with saying we, I don't know, unless it was the royal we. But anyway, make things short. I know that I grew up with that. Everything was being judged, and I was interested in I was intent upon meeting everyone else's expectations, and that's something I self-medicated with. Because
2 minutes, Jeb.
Am I done?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's unfortunate. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jeb. That 2 minutes means just try and wrap it up, is what that means.
Well, I didn't understand that. I hear that voice there periodically. All I wanted to say is so important to me is things that Bill shared in 15 years in the 12 and 12, that we can practice the first step with perfection. Remaining 11 steps are perfect ideals. And out of the first step, the most important thing that I have is a sound and signed ideal for my future relationships. And that's something to grow toward, because that's what and I think that's, if I didn't have that to live toward, I like myself more today than I did yesterday. I didn't like myself a couple seconds ago when I responded or reacted the way I did, but I'll work on that. And that's my 10th step. I know I was wrong in doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeb.
Thanks, Jeb.
Tristan. Are you still with us, Tristan?
I am, yes. Sorry. It's in the little boys' room. Yeah, well, Joe, thanks for a great setup. This is really a good topic. I loved masturbating. It's great. That's a great word. Also, the doctor's opinion, Dr. Seuss. Yeah, it got me thinking. I've been doing some step work lately, and I was racing to the finish line, and I felt manic. And the question I have to ask myself is, what am I racing towards? Do I want resolution? Want relief? I want to hurry up and make a 9-step already. And I had some things that slowed me down. I didn't feel relief. I felt the remorse more deeply, actually. And I really, speaking of owning it, I really started to own some things without the whataboutism and, like narcissistic injury. and it's going to take some time. I may not be able to make amends for some things. Some things are irrevocable. There's no do-overs, and I have to sit with that, and it's pretty heavy. I think what's missing maybe also is maybe a positive inventory. Maybe have a look at my assets too, because it's can easily become a list of shitty things I've done and shitty feelings I've had, and resentments, fears, harms, and one of the things that made me rebel against AA was this thing that seemed to be baked into it that there's something wrong with me. That activates my whataboutism and my rebellion. Actually, I go from 0 to Satan in 10 seconds. That's that's not really healthy. But yeah,
Tristan.
I guess I gotta add AA to my 4th step. But anyway, yeah, thanks for this topic and for the very detailed and thoughtful analysis on the language and how the language activates perfectionism. I thought that was really illuminating. So thanks.
Thanks, Tristan. Mac in PA.
Yes, sir. I'm Mac. I'm an alcoholic. And boy, this has been a wonderful workshop. Thank you so much to everybody. And I just got 2 things. One is I suffered a lot with perfectionism. I still do to some extent, but I got a lot of help after a long time in AA. Once I got to Al-Anon, and I had a black belt sponsor, and I got a lot of help there. And but a couple of years ago, I read in some daily reader, I don't know what it was, and it really helped me a lot, is that when airplanes flying on instruments, like it's on autopilot or something like that, 95% of the time is off course and correcting towards course. And that helped me a lot. I could sit with that pretty good. That, and another friend in Al-Anon recommended that I put a sign up over my kitchen sink that says, "Get over yourself." And I do that. And that's my mantra. All that, over and out. Thank you.
Thanks, Mac. Deborah?
I am Deborah, alcoholic. Joe, Alan, Marya, thanks so much. Perfect topic. I have developed some really good ways of dealing with perfectionism, and I'll just take one, which is I don't start whatever it is that I know I won't be able to do perfectly. Because if I don't start, of course, I can't do it badly. Well, I know that that's not a good strategy, so I tell myself, I have to do this. Well, now I'm down another rabbit hole if I have to do this. Okay, so I have some tools to deal with that. Start the tools, I can't deal with that perfectly either. So I keep adding more knots to the knot of dealing with perfectionism until I have such an enormous ball of knots that it's going to be impossible to untangle. So then the answer to that, of course, is to stop. Don't go back to don't try. The only thing that's really worked for me is to remember that my favorite music I love, because before digital recordings, analog music had imperfections, change in tone, change in speed, and that is what made it great. It was those imperfections. So that's where I go when I start getting into this knot. With any luck, I'll stop before I get so many knots added to the first one. Perfectionism, I'm always looking for suggestions, other people's tools to deal with it. And I've gotten some here. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, Deborah. We're glad that's true. Kat G.
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine, recovered alcoholic.
Hi, Catherine.
Okay. Great workshop. I've got so much going on in my head, but I appreciate hearing about the full gamut of recovery, being new, having time, and being aware of my journey. When I was newly sober, the perfectionism showed up in trying to do everything that was suggested to me. It was like this race from one end of the day to the other to try to do everything so that I wasn't somehow struck drunk. I was so terrified of drinking again. And it worked for a little while, but after a while that didn't work, because then when I wouldn't do something or I would fail at something, I had this horrible anxiety and self-hatred and such. And somewhere along the line, I started lightening up. You know, Rule 62, not to take myself so seriously, and everything that I do isn't this great big deal. And all I need to do is what I think of as the essentials. What are my essentials? My essentials really are about staying sober, certainly for one, and then trying to be kind and loving. That's my thing, and that loving means also loving towards myself, which means be patient, be forgiving, be understanding, and try to be that way with others. And because I do think that a big part of what sobriety is for me is about how I interact with the world, how I respond, and I want to have a degree of ease and comfort in spite of difficulties. And I've been able to attain that in AA, and I'm really grateful. So that balance for me is, you know, the road is wide. You know, I try to encompass those basics, and I kind of veer off and get impatient, and I kind of get angry.
Kat.
You know, but somehow, you know, I stay within that spectrum, and I keep it a day at a time, and I'm really full of gratitude for a life that is second to none. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left before we're going to do the wrap up. So, Lisa? Or is it Liza?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Liza. Thank you.
Okay.
Is that me?
Yes, that's you.
Well, I wanted to say thank you, first of all. I so look forward to these things. And Joe, please don't let me scare you, dear. I was only kidding in that message.
I know.
You know, I'm not real sure if I'm just way ahead of the game or if I'm just incredibly lazy, because I don't understand this desire for perfectionism. I mean, I get to if I start, I get to that point where I'm ready to abort. I'm tired with this. I'm getting bored already. So wrap it up and go on to the next. I don't know. And I've always thought, well, is there something wrong with me? Because I do not stress over getting something perfect. I could give a shit less. If it's doable, if it's workable, if it's passable, it's fine. It's fine. If I need to come back to it and tweak it, I can do that. But I need to get on to the next thing and enjoy what the heck I'm doing. If I was going to sit around and pontificate perfection, I would be bored out of my freaking mind. Where is the excitement in that stuff, people? Anyway, I just wanted to share my goofball perspective on it, and that's all. So thank you again. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks for your goofball perception. We really appreciate it. Patrick, one last share here.
My name's Patrick. I'm a lovable guy.
Hey, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
And an alcoholic. And it's therein lies the solution for me, is that during, you know, many years of recovery where my 10th step at night meant I would be looking at that which I hadn't accomplished, or which, if I just wouldn't have said that to her, it would have been a great day. If I just would have got that last thing, it would have been a great day. And there was zero self-acceptance in it. So it didn't become a 10th step. It became a self-flagellation, the perfection being to me the opposite of self-acceptance, you know? So I today take myself so much less seriously, you know? When I say I'm a lovable guy, it's because I learned that when I'm in that place, the perfectionism is gone. I just had a little experience when we had our 5-minute break. I'm like, oh, I need to get some cereal. So I go upstairs. There's no cereal bowls clean. There's only bigger bowls. And I think I'm not really capable of filling that bowl to the way I would a cereal bowl. What am I going to do here? Right. But I'm not going to, clean one of the other bowls. I'm going to try to fill it halfway. Unfortunately, I'm not quite capable because I'm Mr. Too Much is Just Right at the same time. But when I finished with the bowl and it was fuller than it could be, I had a great laugh about it because that's a part of who I am. Is Mr. Too Much is Just Right, but that's okay too. I work on those things, but I'm okay with me night in, night out. And that's taken me a lot of tears and a lot of hard work to come to that place to know that I'm okay. And this has been great today. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, we're just about to the witching hour, so I thought I would ask our friend Joe if he has any last words. Let's say the last words before we wrap up.
Well, yeah, just like everyone was spot on. Can't wait for March. That's going to be great. I'm very excited about that. Just a couple of things. The word relationship, which Alan brought up. It's my word of the year. I'm in sort of a men's recovery group, and we all had a word for the year. And it's not just the relationships with the people I'm in, my children, my friends, my fellow members, but my relationship with things like my perfectionism, my recovery, the government, all of those sorts of things I'm reviewing. And someone else brought up something about language for younger people. Russell Brand's book, I'm not crazy about him, the guy, but his book, Recovery, I think is just bang on for this millennium. It talks about consumerism and how that breeds addiction, and his fuck it steps are just, it just breaks the mold, right? Like you can go in any direction and make it your own. And, I think we're at a better time in recovery than we've ever been. Zoom has part to do with that for sure, but I want to make time for the rest of them to close out.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, speaking of which, the when we do the one after Marya's will be my turn, and I'm going to talk about relationships as a pathway to emotional sobriety. And I don't mean just one-on-one relationships. Marya, would you like to close a few words?
Yeah, just really briefly, one of the things that's been pervasive in hearing people talking and also my thoughts during this, I hear so many people, and I know this is true of myself, perfectionism can be an answer to anxiety. I go to perfectionism when I'm dealing with strong emotions. So as a leg of emotional sobriety, perfectionism can, for me, become a prop that isn't actually strengthening me. And so when I drop the perfectionism and learn a little bit more about standing or being in my own body, in my own emotional self, strong and balanced, the perfectionism can fall away. I can kind of let that go. And that's what I'll be talking about next month in terms of getting to know emotional range and how do we handle the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Thanks, Joe. Thanks all for being here.
Thank you, Marya. We're really looking forward to that. And when I taught writing at the university, one of the things I used to tell the students is just write. Just write. By the time you get to the end of what you've just written, you'll probably have your starting paragraph. So just write. Alan, would you like to close us out?
Yes, I got a couple different thoughts about this. So look, I think that first of all, it's so exciting to see so many people show up for an emotional sobriety meeting. And Bill was hoping that back in 1956, when he wrote a letter to this fellow out in California, it became an article in the 58 Grapevine, that emotional sobriety would be the next real spearhead of the a major development in an AA. And it didn't happen. And I think it didn't happen is because I think that we chose a spiritual bypass rather than doing this work. This is not easy work. This is tough work because you've got to look at, so what I say is you've got to look at who you're not in order to be what you can be. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I say emotional sobriety is when the best in you is in charge of the rest of you. And only the best in you can see the worst in you. And we have to keep that in mind as we do this. And where this perfectionism intersects with emotional sobriety and what I would really call emotional dependency is it creates all of these expectations about how life is supposed to be, how I'm supposed to be. And when I am busy or you're busy objecting to what life is instead of dealing with what it is, you can't have emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety is self-regulation. That means letting go of all of these nonsense ideas that we have and learning how to show up and start coping with what's in front of us. And when we do that, we start to confront that we've got a lot of habits, we've got a lot of ways of thinking about things that are not helpful, that are getting in the way. I love that idea that let's just look at what's helpful or not instead of what's right and wrong. Is it toxic or is it nourishing for us? And if we start to focus on these things and find that field beyond right and wrong, I think we can start to achieve emotional sobriety. So I wanted to say that. The other thing I wanted to mention, I put it in the chat on Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, that I started an emotional sobriety meeting when COVID hit, and it's been going on for 9 months now. It's an hour-long meeting. We are now focusing on how the steps help us achieve emotional sobriety. There's a bunch of YouTube videos that for the previous meetings, looking at steps 1 through 4. In fact, this will be the last week that we're looking at 4, and then we'll dig into 5. So please come and join us. When's our next meeting? John, when do we meet in March? What's the date?
March 28th.
March 28th. So please put that in your calendars. Somebody asked in the chat, is this an open meeting or is this just an AA meeting? No, this is open for anyone that has any interest in this stuff. I believe emotional sobriety is the point that all of us in recovery can intersect and share our journey together. It's for anyone and everyone. So please spread the word, tell people about what we're doing here and come and join us.
Thanks, Alan. The easy way to remember it is it's every other month, the last Sunday of the month. And I think that's easier. It may not be. If you can remember that, I can't remember that. But anyway, I wanted to thank, just on the behalf of the Freethinkers Living Sober Group of Verde Valley, I'd like to thank Alan and Marya and Joe and me, and a special thank you to all of you for attending today, and also for our backstage helpers, John S. and Kat L. There's more information at our website. If you would like, there's a main website for Freethinkers Living Sober, and then we also have one for emotional sobriety where the videos and the audio will be. You should have seen in the chat the links, including the links for Dr. Berger's YouTube channel on optimal recovery and emotional sobriety. Just Google Alan Berger. He'll come up with lots and lots of stuff. And that's Marya Hornbacher's site is there too, and Joe's. And Joe does a podcast. I'm not sure. Is it every month or is it just whenever you get around to it, Joe?
Yeah. Whenever I got something to say.
Okay, that's what I thought. Anyway, thank you all very much for being here. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again soon. We have to cut out because Alan's got something to do.
I got a podcast. Start Right Here. Check out our podcast. It's every week. It's called Start Right Here, Conversations About What Matters Most. I do it with Tom Rutledge. Today's guest is Dr. Michael McGee, and we're going to talk about mindfulness, and Michael's a special man. So Start Right Here, Conversations About What Matters Most.
Right on.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Very
Wonderful.
Nice. See you next month.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Kat.